One of the funny things with my book being almost done is I get to finally start thinking about the other stuff that I'm going to be doing as soon as I don't have to worry about the actual printing process. Because that's the last thing. I've done everything but that. Is that off center? Okay, scroll up for a second. Let's see. I kind of like that it's off center. Now, characters. Something's not right. There we go. I'll just draw it on that level. So let's do it that way. Because Kelsey always looks happy. There we go. But yeah, I've had so many projects I just haven't been able to start because of doing other stuff. I want to make a mini comic. I need to do some anthology submissions. I've had a D&D comic I've been thinking about doing for a while. A couple D&D comics, actually. I'm working on a Western-themed campaign, and I've wanted to do some world-building stuff by doing comics about it. I've also got a character in another campaign that is that all I needed? That I've thought about doing their backstory in comic form, which I thought would be kind of fun. And turn that off. That is perfect. Bam! All right. Back to this one. We're on to the next step, inking. So when I finished my last book, oh, that's what's happening. The original book in The Letters of the Devil. The very first thing I did was a horror comic called The Man in Green. I love doing horror comics. It's one of my absolute favorite things to draw. And in a weird way, horror comics are kind of like the opposite of doing a mystery comic, in that mystery requires a lot of forethought, a lot of preparation and planning, and getting every little piece exactly where it needs to be. And that is not the case with horror. With horror, you're going for the gut reaction. You're going for the feeling. That's really what you want to do to capture it. And the less you have to think about that, the better. So it was a great thing to do right after having worked on a mystery and spending a ton of time on it. It's also kind of funny. One of the things that you don't realize until you've done a long form project is how weird it is to keep consistent for very long periods of time. When I was working on The Man in Green, one of the things that happened was I was still at the Center for Cartoon Studies as a super senior. That was my grad school, by the way. I completely forgot that he's got a feather in his hat. There we go. Include it. Just have to remember to add it on all the others. Remind me if I forget. But yeah, I was working on it in one of the CCS labs, and one of the current students came up and happened to see me working on it, and he said, "Wow, your art on that looks a lot better than it does in your book." And he said it in a nice way, like it wasn't trying to be a jerk, but I was like, "Yeah, the reason for that is I had to keep drawing that book so that the whole thing looked consistent." But I started that book like a year and a half. The art for that book like a year and a half before I was working on The Man in Green, so my art abilities had gone up, but I had to act like they hadn't. It's kind of a hard thing to explain, but if you want the book to look consistent, your choices in that situation are either go back and redraw everything or draw closer in line to the way you used to. And that is not an easy thing to do. Or neither one's an easy thing to do, but in this case, it was better to do it drawing down than redrawing everything, because that would have just gotten nothing done. One of the fundamental tricks in being a creator is learning how to accept good enough. That's a tough thing to do. There's a lot of perfectionism in the creative fields, which I get, but what's the saying? Perfection is the enemy of progress, something like that. If you're too obsessed with getting every little thing perfect, you're never going to succeed. You're never going to get what you want done. And you're never going to actually put out product because you're always going to be obsessed with getting it exactly right. Let's fix that. That's bothering me. There we go. Yeah. So something that keeps throwing me on this, it's a streamer problem. So I'm drawing on a screen over to the side, but on my main screen, I have the information for the stream up, and the problem is when I see the mouse moving over here, it looks like it's moving on this screen. So when I'm trying to change something, I'm like, why is the mouse being weird? Just streamer problems. Just silly people problems. Which, if you like any of my stuff, you probably like very silly people. One of the main horror comics I've been messing with, and part of the issue is that it involves a medical condition that I need to do more research on before I'm happy with this story. But it involves someone with prosopagnosia, more colloquially known as face blindness. And I've got an interesting concept for a story of painting that is actually stealing parts of people's faces, and this person is the only one who actually notices that the change is happening. But it's a little tricky because a lot of people do not understand how prosopagnosia works, which kind of a problem when you want to do a story about it. Let's see, how do I want to do this?